Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Greg, the head of marketing over here at Empire Flippers. And today I am speaking with a very good friend of mine, Mads Singers. Now, unfortunately, even though Mads lives in the same city as me, we had so many technical issues with our internet connection, which is really weird. We both have pretty solid internet. Not sure what happened. We tried to clean it up and edit it to be good for you guys, but hopefully it comes out good where you guys can hear Mads' wisdom. So I've known Mads for a long time. He was my original coach when I started becoming a manager, and he's someone that I've learned a ton of cool stuff about business from when it comes to delegation and what you're going to learn today on the art of hiring, because a lot of people make some pretty big and pretty common mistakes that you should avoid when you're hiring people. And hiring people is one of the number one ways that you can increase the value of your business. So when you come to someone like me, I can introduce you to a buyer who wants to make you rich, because guess what? You've hired someone and the business no longer relies on just you for its success. And to me, that it becomes a very sellable asset. So without further ado, let's get into this episode with Mads Singers. I'll see you on the other side. All right, I got Mads Singers with me, the myth, the legend, the man of the hour. Mads, thanks for coming on to the podcast. You've been around here on this podcast a few times, but for my friends out there listening in who do not know your legend, why don't you tell us a bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. So, yeah, my name is Mats, and I'm a management coach and consultant. That's kind of my passion and what I love doing. So, teaching people how to be a good boss, people such as Greg. I gave up on you though, but besides that, no, really helping business owners become a good leader and a good boss, right? Because reality is a lot of people out there is putting into leadership and management roles or business owner, and they don't have any experience in managing people. So my passion is to help them get that experience, get the cheat code. So I'm like, when people go to the gym and they hire a personal trainer in the beginning to get up to speed, I'm the personal trainer if you're getting into management or if you're struggling with management. So besides that, I own a bunch of other companies. So we have a large recruitment company where we both do outsourcing and we do sourcing in US and UK and so on. And then we have HeyRamp, which is a people management SaaS tool that I one day will sell with Greg. So
Gotta make this podcast ROI positive, dude.
that's the one. That's the one.
Yes. I will have you know, since the last time you've been on this podcast, I do now hard sell everyone that is a guest on this podcast. So you're either buying a business or selling one with me by the end of this, my friend.
Why just one?
I like that mindset. That is a winner's mindset right there. I do want to give a shout out to your management coach. And, you were my coach when I first became management. Like, that's no joke for the audience out there. And Matt and I joke all the time together, but you were my coach and like you made it crystal clear. So I do highly recommend you. Like, I try to refer people to you all the time when it comes to that. But in this episode, we're talking not so much on the art of delegation that you're so good at, but rather hiring. Maybe before we get into hiring, we talk a little bit about your two companies, because you've owned a staffing company for pretty much as long as I've known you, and now you've doubled that. So walk me through those two staffing companies and kind of the creation of those two things.
Yeah, so we have Aristo Sourcing, which is an outsourcing company, and then we have Aristo Search, which is a more local hiring company, US, UK, Australia, etc. But fundamentally, again, my background is leadership and management. We have about 350 staff across our companies now. And like with most other things, I love helping people with the things they're not so good at. And besides managing, very often staff hiring can be quite difficult wherever you're looking for remote or local staff. So our recruitment company is very simple, helping people fix that gap. So obviously we have a ton of experience in recruiting. We have a ton of experience in finding the right type of people for the right type of roles and so on. So any clients that come to us, we spend a good bit of time figuring out exactly what they need. And then we have some extremely experienced recruiters. Most of our recruiters have 15 plus years of recruitment experience. So they're extremely experienced in going out, finding the right candidates, and really getting you hooked up. So, what I always tell people when it comes to recruitment is you always want to do the final interviews yourself. Like getting a company to help, weed out great candidates and put some great candidates in front of you is great, but never make a company choose for you. Because in the end of the day, like the culture in your business, you having you being comfortable with the individual is critically important. So I don't ever want to tell one of our clients, hire this guy. I want our team to find, two, three, four, five good candidates or whatever we can find, put them in front of you and getting you to interview them so that you feel comfortable. Again, I always tell our clients, if you're not comfortable, the person in front of you can do the job, don't hire them, right? Sometimes, and it happens a lot in business where, we're so busy, we're so struggling, so we are happy just to fill the seat. But reality is, as leaders, we want to be comfortable that when we hire someone, we really believe they can deliver. That doesn't mean that 100% of people do. If we don't have a sort of clear belief that the individual can deliver, then you're not starting at the right point, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've been in pretty much all of those scenarios over my career at this point. So I definitely understand the want to just like fill the seat because, like, man, I'm hair on fire, all that kind of fun stuff. When someone goes about hiring, and maybe we can gear this towards our crowd who often are solo founders, right? Who are growing and maybe they've never hired anyone at all. What are the big mistakes that these founders should be avoiding when they go about hiring someone?
Okay, let's take a step back. So before you look at the mistakes, the real question to ask is, what are the things you're looking for? So with small businesses, business owners tend to look for staff that can do seven different things, ideally plug seven different holes and fix all of the things they're doing. My recommendation is very different. It is figure out the one thing that makes someone a success. So, what is the one thing a new hire needs to be able to absolutely kill it at to be a success, right? Because if you figure that out and if you get the right get the right person in who is exceptionally good at one thing that makes it worth their while having them in the company, then you can always look at adding more stuff later. But the starting point should be get them in, get them doing one thing exceptionally well, and something that hopefully help your business make a very healthy profit or financially benefit from having them in place, right? So that's typically my initial recommendation to people. And this forces business owners and managers, for that sake, it forces them to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what is one thing that we really need handled? What is the thing that matter the most of all of the things we want done right now? Right. And then the way I tend to go down through it is I find the best person I can for that one thing. And then I look at, okay, what other skill sets do they have? And then I start looking at my list. So if I get them in, I get them really good, kicking ass at this one thing. Then I start looking at what else do we have on the list and how does that match with the skill set of the individual who's there. Right.
That makes total sense to me. With what you were saying with the broad stuff, I was talking to a guy, he was hiring a marketer, and the job role was basically five different disciplines of marketing where like you could devote your entire career to just like one. And this other dude, he was asking me about hiring a marketer, and I was like, "Oh, well, what kind of marketer are you looking for?" And he's like, "Well, growth marketer." Like, okay, like what kind of growth marketing? He's like, "There's different kinds." Like, like yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things. So I do think a lot of people make the mistake of looking for this unicorn that often just doesn't exist, or if they do, like usually the job posting isn't going to be able to pay them enough for their unicorn status, right? What else do people get wrong when it comes to hiring, whether it's the actual like job description or the interview? Like what are the other like one or two big mistakes people make?
Yeah, the second thing, and this is what I spend a lot of time on, is getting the right personality into the right roles. Because reality is all people have strengths and weaknesses, right? So there's certain things you're good at, there's certain things I'm good at, and those things are very different. When we look at
I
you
was
and
just telling
me,
you about a certain thing I'm very terrible at right before this call started. For the audience, I've been fighting our HubSpot landing page builder.
But reality is people are naturally gifted at certain things. And depending on the role, depending on the expertise and the specialism you're looking for the particular role, you're kind of looking for people with a certain personality to try and fill that role. So as an example, even if someone have done sales for 10 years, if they're super introverted and afraid of talking to people, and they are less likely to succeed in a sales role, right? So there's just certain natural behaviors that are important to look at. And that's why for me, like every single time we hire people, we look at this behavior and we look at either the things we do want or do need in there, or the things we don't want or don't need in there, right? So sometimes there's certain behaviors you don't want in an individual, and sometimes there's a particular behavior you do want, right? But that's incredibly important. So some roles, for example, like developers or accountants, like you generally want very detail oriented people because you want your accounting to be right, not almost right, or not almost right most of the time.
You're about profitable.
Right. So it's important to look at that as well. And that's something that one, most people don't understand, but like the personality is for me critical. It doesn't guarantee you get the right person, but it helps you avoid failure. That's how I look at the personality aspect. Other key things, and this is one I've been jumping in with both feet a couple times, is sort of mistake people make is a lot around resumes or CVs, right? So a lot of the time they get a resume in the door, they look at it and they're just like, wow, this is amazing. This is just the guy or just the girl I need. Fantastic. So before they ever talk to the person, they've already agreed with themselves in their head that this is the right person. Now, the big challenge with that is that when you go ahead and do that, you're creating sort of a positive bias in your head. So you're looking for every reason why this person is the best instead of being critical the way you should be, right? So the way I generally say to people is that a resume is the door opener for the interview. But at an interview, everyone starts at the same point. So the second I start interviewing people, they are all equal. I don't care what the resume is. I don't care what the experience are. Everyone starts at the same level in an interview, right? Because you don't want to have either positive or negative bias. Sometimes you might interview someone and you're like, yeah, I'll just test them out, but I'm pretty sure this person sucks, right? Like if you think they suck, you will make them suck. You know, everything you tell yourself is generally gonna be confirmed, right? So you'll find a way to confirm it. So this is another sort of very important mistake that I see people make a lot because when they do that, they often end up with someone who's great on paper, but not necessarily the right person because they overlooked some big red flags.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. And the bias thing in particular, like not just hiring, but in general, like I find for us, for example, sometimes we lean too much going to the same conferences or same place or whatever, like just because we're comfortable with that versus going to the uncomfortable place where no one knows us, right? Where we're not a known name and like building new connections and all that kind of stuff. So I see that even in other aspects of business. When you're hiring someone, so you mentioned personality, right? I've ran into this issue before where like in the interview, personality is great. Then they get hired, like, ooh, personality is terrible. like there's like they is a different person. I've had to let people go because they're just like honestly toxic to the team, like in terms of like what their personality is. Ironically, they were actually pretty good at the job, but they were very toxic for the culture. How can you prevent that, ideally before you make the mistake of hiring someone like that?
Yeah, so one of the most important things is starting by actually realizing what is your culture. Most people don't know the starting point, right? But it's important as a leader and a manager, and particularly at a company level, it's important to sit down and look at what is our culture. And as a company, your culture is never what you say it is, your culture is what actually happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
If everyone shows up 5 minutes late, your culture is it's totally okay to show up late. If everyone delivers on time every time, your culture is that you deliver on time every time,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same with people, how you treat each other, how you talk to each other. If your culture is that there's a very sharp tone, a very direct tone, well, if that's the culture, right? So actually spending time looking at your company and saying, what is the culture? How's people behaving? How's people treating each other? When you look at your top people, what are some of the behaviors that makes them top people? And what is sort of the similarities within your team? And you really look at that to understand what is your culture, right? Changing culture is very, very difficult, but it always starts by identifying it, right? And sometimes when I've done this exercise with people, they sit down and they're like, oh, wow, my culture is not what I want it to be. And I'm like, maybe you don't have the right people, because reality is people drive culture. Like I have a great example. When I worked in IBM, right, we were in a physical office. You could always see it on the team. If someone walks in on the first day on time and they see half the team sort of coming in 5, 10 minutes late, within the first week, no exception, they will be late at least once, right?
Of
If they
course.
see everyone else being on time sharp every day, they will have zero lateness in the first week. And it's a simple example to look at, but that is exactly how culture works, right? And that's also why the people you talked about that's not good for culture. If you have people in your team that talk to other team members in a certain way and they quote get away with it because they're top performers or they're your friend or whatever, then that is going to be the culture in the team. Because if one person do it, other people is going to be very comfortable doing the same.
No. I agree with all of that. But again, how do you prevent that? Let's say you do know your culture, right? And you're interviewing this person, and like I'm sure you would agree with this. There's people who are very good at being interviewed, but when they become an employee, it's like 180, like, whoa, pulled a fast one on me. Is there like red flags you can kind of like probe during the interview for that kind of culture to see if they are a fit?
Yeah, I would say so. The key thing when it comes to the culture and interviews is knowing your own culture, seeing how does the individual in front of you fit into that, right? So asking a question, not like, hey, do you always show up on time? Like,
Do you want to show up late?
right? Everyone's going to say yes, right? But it's basically, again, talking them through good examples of, you had a difficult situation with a colleague. How did you deal with it? And looking at what, a specific example of what did they do in a certain situation, right? And what you're looking for is not actually the specific steps or the outcome. It is their thought patterns and it's their behavior. So, were they taking full ownership, or were they like, yeah, we didn't hit our targets because all my colleagues sucks, right? Or are they, hey, we had a difficult time. We had some people on the team that didn't really know what they were doing, but I was really pushing. I was really trying to help my colleagues get up to speed. Like, there's very different ways people communicate. And when you start asking questions like that, where you ask them to explain specific situations and so on, you often start seeing their, not necessarily their culture, but you start seeing their values and how they think. And you want to understand if that matches with what you want in the company and what you have in the company right now, right?
Yeah.
So that's the best way to do it, right? So really trying to, a good example, I was working with a company in the US, a SaaS startup, and everyone was working 16 hours a day or 12 hours or whatever, but they were working a ton, right? And they hired this operations manager. She, great lady. She came from another big company. She had lots of experience, absolute killer at what she does. She walked in, and after about 8 hours, she walked out. And everyone just looked at her and they were like, oh my God, this new person who is an operations, like a senior
What a
operations person,
slacker.
is walking out of the job on time, right? And here's the thing, she was probably the right one, right? She would probably have been an absolutely huge benefit for the company if she had worked there longer. But because she didn't fit into the culture, no matter if the culture was right or wrong, the point was she didn't fit into it, right?
Yeah.
And she ended up leaving very quickly. Now, again, this is just an example. I'm using a different example because culture is many things, right? So your goal as a leader and manager is to figure out what is it our company does, what is it that make us unique, and really trying to see with new people or people you're interviewing, do you believe this person fit into this, right? Now, in terms of what you were saying earlier with people who kind of turn around, they interview really well and then they turn around and don't do anything, as example. Again, a lot of this comes down to behavior, right? Some people are very good at talking a great game. Some people are very bad at selling themselves. Like actually,
Yeah.
some of the best people are, if you're like, hey, are you great at SEO? And they're like, I'm kind of okay, right? Those people are
It's gonna be
often
awesome.
better
It's gonna
than
be
people that are
awesome.
like, yeah, I'm fucking awesome. So again, really learning and understanding human behavior is so beneficial for being able to evaluate and judge those things. Because typically, as an example, people that tend to talk exceptionally well for themselves tend to be assertive and they tend to be good at putting themselves forward, right? Now, some of those people are also very good at delivering. Many of them are really good at talking. And as soon as you hire them, they will keep talking. They won't necessarily be delivering. Now, in some roles, talking is great. In some roles, talking is less useful, right?
Yeah.
Again, this is where behavior and understanding different people comes in and so on. And this is some of the stuff I spend a lot of time on in training, right? Because it's so essential both to hire the right people, but more so actually to manage your staff the right way. Because if you manage your team the right way, everything just becomes so much easier.
Well, as a professional talker who is an assertive B personality, I pride myself on my lack of delivery, but my promises are very good. But what you just said there about the SEO guy reminded me of a person I actually hired. And it was really funny. So, my second command at the time, him and I were interviewing people. And we had this guy who was very meek on the interview, like very quiet. You could barely hear what he was trying to tell you. And he didn't sound unconfident, but he didn't sound like boldly confident either. Right. And I told my second command afterwards, like, he's the one. Like, we were hiring for like basically kind of like a technical SEO role. And he's like, really? Like, he didn't impress me that much. Like, oh, he impressed me. I have a very strong feeling. And I hired a guy. He was great. Like, anything with technical stuff, he was just an absolute master. He was even good at email copywriting. He was like quite talented as long as you didn't put him on a microphone. Like, if you put him on a microphone, he was the worst. But I just like, this is the guy that stresses over every single word. So there's definitely a lot of that goes into it. Another question, and I don't know how you'd spot this in an interview, but maybe someone does good on the interview, you give them a test and they prove that they are able to do it, then they join up with the company and their skills is not in doubt at all. Like, they are quite good when they want to be, but then you find out that they're also very much not proactive. This is something that happened to me recently because, like, one of our cultures, we're very hands off management, right? I wouldn't say any of us at EF are like these hardcore micromanagers. So we give people a lot of freedom to kind of like do their thing and have breathing room. Do you think that it was a culture misfit where this guy wasn't as proactive as I thought and maybe he needed more micromanagement? And is that something you could catch in an interview?
So there's a couple of things with this. It often comes down to not necessarily the interview, but how the individual is being managed, right? So what you want to do up front is generally set very, very clear expectations. And you want to make sure you have very, very clear goals, right? Now, that doesn't mean everyone will make it, but a lot of time, if someone is capable and they know exactly what you expect and when you expect it by, in most cases, they will deliver because they want to keep their job. However, if it's not clear what you want delivered, or if there isn't clear timelines, or if there isn't clear goals, then those kind of people tend to procrastinate more. So it's not necessarily a question of, so people often misunderstand micromanagement, right? So micromanagement is not just sitting hitting someone in the head, but it's more about saying, here's what I want and here's exactly the way I want it, right? And that's not generally how you want to manage. The way you want to manage is you want to give people a goal or a target, and then you want to, let them know that whatever resources they need come to you, or, let's have a chat about it. But you want to make the goals and the objectives for them extremely clear. right? That
Yeah.
does a few things, particularly in the early days in a new job. If someone knows by the end of month one, I must have delivered X, Y, Z, right? That makes it very clear to them what success looked like. It makes it very clear to them, hey, if I don't hit these goals, I'm probably not making it to month two. And that's a very, very good way to give people ownership, but at the same time, really clarify to them exactly what is expected, right?
It's almost like I've been trained by you. I was just talking to a friend. He had this insanely complicated like Google sheet for all of his KPIs, and I asked him because we were talking about his employees, right? He's looking at selling his company, that's why we were talking. But I asked him like, with your employees, can they see these KPIs? Like, yeah, yeah. Like, how do they do it? Like, you had to go through this insane group of options and drop downs and into all this stuff. Like, dude, like it takes like 50 clicks, and you have to know where to go just to see if you're succeeding or not. Like, no wonder you're having this issue with your employees. They have no clue where they ever stand. So I feel you on the clarity there.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing because reality is you never know if someone is going to deliver. You don't, right? Like I tend to say, I'm fairly good at recruiting. I've done a lot of it. I'm probably getting it right 8 or 9 out of 10 times, right? Now, when I first started recruiting, I probably got it right 3 or 4 out of 10 times. So it's always a numbers game, but you're dealing with humans. And sometimes humans are humans, right? Like sometimes you hire them and 2 weeks later they go through a divorce or their kid
Yeah.
dies
Yeah.
or like you never know, right? Because they're humans, again, you need to treat them and manage them like humans, which means you want to give them ownership, you want to give them responsibility, you want to set clear expectations. And the core thing for you as a leader and as a manager in the beginning, again, it's not micromanaging, but it's making sure that they are making progress. Sometimes with some people, you need to be a little bit more hands on. They want a little bit more guidance. And particularly if they're brand new to a company, it can be hard to ask for help because you come into a new place, you don't know who anyone are, you don't know what is where, you don't know where to find the files on the shared drive that everyone else knows, and you don't know a lot of stuff. Particularly in the first couple of weeks, whenever you have a new starter, like I try and spend a significant amount of time with them. And a significant amount of time for me, that could be a daily check-in for 10, 15 minutes, right? Just saying, how are you getting on? Are you comfortable? Is there anything you're missing? Any logins you're struggling with? Anyone you want to get introduced to? Anything like that, right? But again, it's just to show them the support, be there for them, and just be like, hey, how are you getting on, right? And some people, even smart, capable people, if you hire them, they start the work, and for 2 weeks, they don't hear much from you. Some of them will succeed from that, but some also absolutely drown, right? And
Yes.
you want to make sure that you give everyone a fair chance of succeeding by having clear goals, by checking in, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pivot here a little bit. So we're talking right now like hiring mistakes that people often make. But from the other perspective, like I want to get the best employees as possible, like applying, right? So, what can a founder or a hiring manager do to make their job actually attractive, to bring out like the best people to apply? Do you have any advice there?
Well, generally build a killer brand. So if you have a brand like Empire Flippers, you have a big email list, and that's reality, right? Like people want to work with cool companies, and if you build a cool brand, more people are likely wanting to work for you, right? So that's a good starting point. I spend a lot of time meeting humans wherever I go, and for me, networking is one of the strongest way to find really good people, either by meeting people directly or getting to know people who know people and so on. I generally say when you put out a job ad, ask all your friends to share it, ask all of your team to share it. Like the goal is fundamentally get as many qualified candidates into your funnel as you possibly can find, right? There's many ways that you can do to kind of slim down in a somewhat automatic way, but you want as many qualified people who qualified for the criteria you have in the funnel that you can possibly find, right? And many people, they're like, oh, I got 40 candidates now. Let me get started, right? I'm like, if you only have 40 candidates, I'm not saying there isn't a good one in there, but I'm just saying everything else being equal, if you have 400 or 1,000, the likelihood that there's at least one really good in there is significantly high, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything you'd recommend for people in terms of like advertising? I feel like there's kind of two schools of thought on this one in particular, like showing compensation on the job role. Some people give a range, some people don't show it at all, some people like it's just this number. Everyone seems to have a bit of a diversity of thought there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I would say is in some countries, in some places, you have to show by legal rights. So, for example,
True.
some states
True.
in the US, you got to show the pay scale. I generally prefer to, both because I hate it myself when people don't put it. Like, I'll be
Yeah.
realistic with you. If I'm looking to buy a house and I see a really nice house and there isn't a price tag, I am not going to waste time connecting to the people and asking what's the price. I'm not, right? Just in the same way, like if I was unemployed and desperately looking for a job, I might. But here's the key thing: the best people are really unemployed, right? So I believe fundamentally you want to put at least a range or at least yeah, you want to put something. And again, it just helps you with the market. If someone is slightly above, they might apply and say, hey, I'm looking for a bit more. But if you're saying 5 grand and someone is looking for 15, ideally you don't really want to waste time on them, because if you wanted to spend 15 grand on the roll, you wouldn't have put five, right?
Yeah.
So generally, I just for filtering out people and so on, I think it's a good filter. What I would generally say around job, like finding good candidates, I am the biggest fan of LinkedIn. I absolutely hate their recruiting. I hate their, like, they're expensive as hell to use for recruiting and so on. We pay them, I don't know, 20 grand a year at least.
It's like a HubSpot level.
That's HubSpot level. But realistically, as I just said, the best people are rarely unemployed. And the key thing about LinkedIn is that when you're running jobs, paid jobs on LinkedIn, you get yourself in front of people who are doing the job you're advertising for and who are not employed. Here's the thing: when you look at many job boards, when you look at a place like Indeed, most people looking at Indeed are unemployed people.
Yep.
Everything else being equal, the best people are rarely unemployed.
I agree with that. And this kind of leads me to another question I had for you. The LinkedIn thing triggered it to me. So it's one thing to hire like frontline soldiers for the company, right? Like you can have a kind of an assembly line process, a bit to that. But if you're looking for a leadership position, for example, like you're looking to hire from the outside rather than to promote from within, which is a very tricky situation because you're giving someone leadership position and you're not sure if they're going to fit in the culture. I mean, obviously you're going to try your best, but what's your advice on hiring higher level people, say like a C suite or a director level, something that is not entry level where they're going to just be learning the ropes, but like you're expecting them to become a leader of the company? What's your advice there?
There's generally two types of company that needs to hire higher level staff from the outside. Number one is companies that are growing insanely fast. So think of Google and Facebook in the early days, right? When you're promoting from within, and that means you're promoting people every 4 weeks, you're probably promoting too fast, right? So if the company is growing
Yeah.
at an insane rate, you might want to bring in senior people from the outside. The second thing is when you have a very poor culture of developing people. So when you don't have good leadership and team growth development, then occasionally it also makes sense to hire from the outside. My recommendation, though, is do it as little as you possibly can for two reasons. One, you want to build a culture in your business that is focused on growing and developing the people that you have to be promoted, right? Because reality is when you show people within your business that there is space to be promoted and they can get promoted into higher level roles, that makes a lot of people excited and make them stick around, right? If people feel like, oh, the people above me always get hired from the outside, I have no chance here, right?
Right.
That makes people leave your company. So, from that standpoint, it is something that is very motivating internally. Now, from a business finance perspective, it is also typically significantly cheaper to grow and develop your staff internally than hire top level expertise externally, right?
Yeah.
And the third thing is the risk element, right? So for me, business is not about avoiding risk, but it is about taking well calculated risks, right?
Sure.
And the problem is, particularly for higher level roles, particularly around operations and CEO roles, hiring external people, particularly for smaller companies, is often of significant risk. Like I've had two or three people that have come to me after hiring an external consultant. I mean, the company literally died. At least two cases, probably three cases. And what happened was they brought in someone with the right experience, someone who looked great on paper, and they were probably a great person. Now, in some of the cases, they brought in someone who were used to, large companies, think IBM, Google, whatever. And, they suddenly came in a small company. And the big difference is in IBM and Google, when you're a manager, you just manage. You don't do anything. When you come
Yep.
into a small company, the wheels only turn when you do certain things, right? And sometimes the smaller businesses are not ready for higher level leaders like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's a significant risk element in bringing in a senior level manager externally. And I really try to avoid it in all of my businesses when there's any opportunity for me to develop people internally. Now, there is sometimes, I mean, you might have a marketing department with one content writer, and they might not be your future marketing manager, right? So sometimes you're a very small department where the growth just does not make sense. But in most cases, really the goal you want to have and the system and structure you want to build around your leaders is making sure that they're continuously developing their future replacements, right?
Yeah.
So at EF, for example, you're looking after marketing. Now, you want to continuously be developing the guy or girl who is going to replace you when you someday get promoted and become the CEO, right?
I'll let Andy know.
But here's the thing. In most companies, people don't do it because they're afraid that if someone knows all the stuff they're doing, they could get fired and someone else being put in
Yeah.
their place. But it
I've
actually
always thought that
works.
was a silly mentality myself, but yeah, I get their fear.
It had the total opposite
Wow.
effect, right? When I worked corporately, I was very clear to all of my managers, right? I was like, if I promote you into a different role and your team collapses, I am not going to promote you. AKA, if you don't have someone ready to step into your role, you will keep doing your role,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
This is a weird segue, but I've seen this actually happen even in my old blue collar life. So in the oil field, my dad, he was a derrick man. And so like the guy who crawls up the tower back in the 70s and 80s, that was such a dangerous job. Like people were dying like every week with it. And my dad was so good at it, he never got promoted to being a driller because they were afraid if they promoted him, then they would endanger someone else who filled his role. So yeah, like it's true all across the world, regardless if it's a big corporation, small business, or even the trade. So
Yeah. Now, if you do have to hire externally, I would generally try and find people who have done what you're trying to get them to do. And here's the thing, sometimes getting someone from the corporate world into a small business can be extremely helpful, right? Sometimes they come with systems, processes, they come with something. But in many cases, if they haven't previously worked in a business like yours and taken it from where it is to where you want it to be, the chance of them failing is significantly higher,
yeah,
right? So I would always rather hire someone who have done a similar job than who have done the job in a very different kind of business. Because different businesses are different, and particularly this thing, I keep highlighting the corporate thing, but I see so often where people hire some executive or some manager from a big corporation, they hire them into a small business, and honestly, so often it just does not work.
well, it makes total sense. Like you said, that those bigger corporations, the manager is just managing. Like I'm a manager, I'm a director at EF. I'm doing all sorts of stuff. Like I said, I was just fighting with a HubSpot landing page, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a bajillion different random stuff I'm doing all the time that would probably be pretty jarring for someone coming from a bigger corporate thing where they're doing like one specific thing 40 hours a week, right?
But also just budgets, right? Like,
But
you
yeah,
hire
that's one of the reasons why you're doing a lot of different things in a small company, right?
you hire a marketing manager from IBM, and then they come in and say, yeah, we should run this PPC campaign. Let's just put 10 million in this thing. And you're like, let's put $10 or $100. Like,
Yeah,
there's just
yeah,
such a big difference in the work people are doing and so on. And just because someone comes from a bigger company does not mean they're better. Like, it's very
absolutely.
interesting. Like, people are always like, yeah, we're a small company, we don't know how to do this. Like, let's say leadership training. Like, yeah, we're a small company, we aren't doing it. Like, I've worked with some of the biggest company on the planet who doesn't have a good system for developing leaders, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've worked with some of the biggest companies on the planet. So it's not a big versus small. It's some companies get it and some companies don't, right?
Yeah. I've had that experience like when I worked at Halliburton, massive global company, terrible for developing people. like,
Yep.
like every time someone would do their internal processes to get their pay raise, a lot of times the system would just break and erase everything that they did. So I actually got promoted, I think it was like twice in one day because I stopped. I like refused to ever do any of the things they asked me to get my pay raise. And my boss's boss got mad at him, like, why is Greg still on this pay scale? And he called me up, like, Greg, you need to do these I-learns. I told him, nope, never doing them. They always crash and erase. You can do them for me, though. And so he ended up doing them for me. And it was just like a super, what's that movie? Office Space moment, you know? Like, I just stopped caring and they promoted me twice. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen it in big companies too. We're reaching towards the end of the podcast here. I want to touch a little bit on your conference you're doing to give you a little promo love there. But before we do, I do have one more hiring question. And I feel like this is somewhat relevant to me as well in my own specific situation. So if you're a hiring manager, say marketing, because it's like tons of different disciplines, but it could be really anything. And you're looking to hire someone that maybe you don't know the skill. Like I'm a content marketing person, but let's say I'm hiring a paid media gun. Like how do you go about managing and maybe even developing an employee that you're hiring with a skill set that you don't have, who's like doing a thing that you don't know how to do necessarily?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And I actually get it already from interview stage. Like if I'm interviewing a PPC guy and I don't know PPC, how do I pick the right guy? So my trick here, I do this a lot, but my trick here is find a friend. So get to know people, right? Build your network. If I'm interviewing for a role like PPC and I don't understand PPC, what I would typically do is when I find some good people, I would get a friend of mine. I would say, "Hey, can I pay you $100 to interview these three people? I think they're good, but I want you to test their technical skill and tell me where they are if they're any good, right?" So I try and do that initially in the interview phase to test that skill set. Second thing is when they then come into the business. Again, I often have a lot of conversation with these people because I need to be a little bit closer to them and understand what they're doing. Again, I start out with goals. So if you've never done PPC and you're hiring the first person to do PPC in your company, I will have a conversation with them and I'll say, hey, put together a plan for me. Spend the first 2 weeks putting together a plan of what should we be doing, how much should we be spending, etc., etc. And again, I'll take that plan, I'll go to a friend and I'll say, hey, dude, does this make sense? Right? And I'll say, okay, kick it off. And then we go. And then we say, okay, well, here are numbers. What are the numbers? And then over time, just gradually keep pushing at the numbers in the right direction. Right? And again, sometimes I get people in to do an audit. Sometimes I get people in to look at some of the stuff that have been done. Sometimes I love doing this, by the way, is sometimes getting an agency because they always love new customers, right? So get an agency to come in, do a free audit, and then you can see if they have a lot of good improvements options. Sometimes they have, and sometimes you're like, wait a minute, maybe I should be using an agency instead. And then you remember every time you give an agency your PPC, they will screw it up, and then you don't. No.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like you and I, we have tons of agency friends, but I can literally count on like less than half of a hand of how many good ones I've ever hired over 10 years.
My number is 0 when it comes to PPC, but yeah.
Well, I wasn't referring to PPC. I have never hired a good one on that one. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. But that makes sense to me. I like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's generally my approach. So find a friend, I'll pay them some money. I mean, I'll pay them $100 or $500 or whatever they need to help me out. But I love managing people when I don't know what they're doing because it makes me way more focused on managing them instead of telling them what to do. And it helps me not micromanage and focus on managing them instead.
Yeah. I like that. And also it helps you learn it a little bit as well. And I asked that question because I've had that experience a few times where I've hired people who are skilled in ways that I am not at all. And like I feel like marketing in particular is a role where that comes up more often than like you say sales or customer service. Like it's very clear what needs to be done versus like us marketers is like, who knows? Like, where's the attribution? Whatever.
It's also the skill sets, right? I mean, in sales, I guess you have maybe cold emails and cold calls and in person, but the disciplines are very similar. Whereas in marketing,
Yeah.
when you're comparing PPC, email marketing, SEO, social media, like they're very, very different disciplines. And when someone says they're good at them all, I'm always very cautious and don't hire them.
It's funny you say that. So we have a saying in my team. We actually just had this happen and we think we actually did catch an error. But I tell my team whenever I hire someone and once they're on the team, like if you see a KPI that is looking like it's doing really, really well, you should panic because there's probably something wrong. Like, so whenever we get like a KPI that's an outlier, like, wow, we're crushing it. Like one of my coworkers, she just messaged me this week, like, wow, we're really crushing it on the referral programs here. I like, we need to dig into that. And we found something that might be a little awry, right? Like it still looks like it's good, but we found something we need to double check on. And I've been in marketing now long enough to know that if the KPI is too good, it's probably because it's wrong.
That can happen in many areas of the business, I would say that.
Yes, yes. I would say that happens just this is a little off topic, I guess, but in marketing, like especially as your company grows, it's like very easy for that to happen because like I remember I was running ads and our KPI, like I was like this ad god suddenly, like, whoa, what happened? Like, why am I so good at this now? And what had happened was our developer was like trying to change something. And so the reverse the pages. So my thank you page that counted as the conversion was now like the page all the traffic was landing on. So it was all counting as conversions. Like, wow, I'm really glad I looked into that before scaling it, you know? So that's the reason why I always check if things are going too good. But we're coming up on the end of our time here, Mads. I know you have a conference coming up that I'm looking forward to attending. For any of our listeners out there, maybe you can give us a plug on the conference that you got going on.
March 10 to 13, we run the SEO Mastery Summit in Saigon. It is only the best SEO conference on the planet. We have some of the best sponsors in the world. And it's, yeah, March 10 to 13, have some amazing speakers. The big benefit with this being in Vietnam is that we have people flying in from Europe, US, Australia, and many here from Asia. So it's a good mix of people from all over the world, which means you can learn all the tips and tricks and techniques that people are using, even outside of your postal code. So definitely excited to see you there. And if you're into SEO and AI, this is the place to be in March.
Yeah, you have one of my favorite conferences, man. I'll be there. And for anyone listening, we're sponsoring the closing party. So come have some drinks on Empire Flippers if you happen to be in Saigon. Yeah, man. I love your conference, especially because it means I don't have to travel, which is really, really nice.
That is a very great excuse. Yeah.
It's a huge benefit. Yes. For anyone out there listening to this and they want to connect to you, where should we send them to?
Well, mattsingers.com or just search Matt Singers on any social media platform. I am still the only human on the planet with that name. So easy to find.
Perfect. Perfect, man. We'll put them in the show notes. Well, thanks for coming on, Mads, and sharing some of your hiring wisdom.
Thank you. Great being on. Great chat here. Great.
there you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.